Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis. And, for this deep dive, I think we've got a really fascinating one lined up.
Yeah, I think this is going to be good.
This time we're looking at the life and career of Patty Duke.
Yes, Patty Duke. A Hollywood icon, really, but she had a side to her story that wasn't so widely known.
Right, and that's what we're going to kind of dig into today.
A lifelong struggle with bipolar disorder.
Which wasn't diagnosed until much later in her life, right?
Exactly, and that's what makes it so interesting. Looking back now, we have a much better understanding of these things.
Yeah, with the vocabulary we have today.
Exactly how mental health plays into it.
But back then, it was a lot different.
It was, and to see how those around her perceived her experiences, it's a different lens we're looking through.
And that's what makes it so fascinating for this show, right? Because that's what we always talk about, is that connection.
Right, is there
between creativity and mental illness.
We see it again and again, and I think Patty Duke's story is another example of that.
Yeah, so to start, her childhood was anything but normal.
Right, very unusual.
Taken from her family when she was just 12 years old.
12 years old.
Handed over to these talent managers, John and Ethel Ross.
Ambitious.
Ambitious is a nice way to put it.
Yeah, very forceful personality.
To say the least.
Yeah, definitely.
And that right there, you have to wonder what that does to a young mind.
Oh, absolutely. The psychological impact of that kind of separation.
Huge, right?
From your family, the pressure to perform constantly.
And the Rosses, it seems, they really knew how to manipulate the situation to keep her dependent on them.
Oh, there are stories about them telling Patty, if it weren't for us, you'd be, working at the Five and Dime or worse.
Wow.
Really tough things for a child to hear.
Yeah, that's a lot to carry around.
A lot of weight on her shoulders.
And looking back, even in those early years, there were signs.
There were signs, yeah.
Of a struggle.
Yeah.
Constant nightmares, fear of death.
And this habit of constantly clearing her throat or coughing, almost like she was holding back screams.
That's really disturbing when you think about it.
It is. And, we have to ask ourselves, could those have been early signs of what she'd face later on?
The anxiety and all of that.
Right. And I think it's important to remember that back then, diagnosing mental illness in children was even more difficult than it is today.
Right.
We've come a long way, but even now it's tough.
Yeah, so those signs can easily be missed or misunderstood.
Absolutely.
And then things really kind of took a turn, I guess.
They did, yeah.
When she landed her breakout role in the Patty Duke Show at 15.
15-year-old.
Huge success. But to play identical cousins.
It's demanding.
Even for an experienced actress.
Absolutely.
Let alone a teenager who's dealing with all this other stuff.
Right. Imagine the pressure on top of everything else that was going on.
Yeah, it's like, you can almost see how this perfect storm is brewing.
Exactly. And that kind of intense stress could definitely make any underlying mental health issues much worse.
Yeah. Then at 18, she had her first manic episode.
Yeah, they thought it was a reaction to the anesthesia from an appendectomy.
But looking back, it really fits the classic pattern.
It does. Hallucinations, sleeplessness, reckless spending.
All the signs were there.
It's a classic presentation.
And it's fascinating how sometimes those outside factors,
right,
like a surgery or medication,
they can be triggers.
Yeah, for people who might already be predisposed to bipolar disorder.
Exactly, like a spark that sets it off.
But even after that episode, it took years for her to get a proper diagnosis.
Years.
And what followed was just this up and down
roller coaster
of moods.
Highs and lows.
Yeah, extreme highs and really devastating lows.
And that's what bipolar disorder is all about, that cyclical nature.
The mania, the depression.
The mania is so intense, that feeling of boundless energy, but then it crashes down into this deep depression.
And, it's not just the person with the illness who suffers.
Right.
It affects everyone around them.
It ripples outwards.
And for Patty Duke, her relationships really took a hit.
Yes. Her marriage fell apart. Her connection with her children was strained.
Yeah, and that isolation that so often comes with mental illness.
It makes everything harder.
Makes everything so much worse.
Isolates you even more.
And it's just a reminder that early diagnosis and intervention are so crucial.
They're absolutely vital.
For years, she was trapped in this cycle of extreme highs and lows.
And it wasn't until she was 35 that she finally got that diagnosis.
Manic-depressive illness.
As they called it then.
Imagine the relief, finally understanding what you've been going through for so long.
Validation.
Yeah, finally having a name for it.
It can be a real turning point, a diagnosis.
It is.
Because it gives you a framework for understanding your experiences.
Yeah.
It takes away the self-blame, and it opens the door to treatment.
Right. And for Patty, that meant starting on lithium.
Yeah,
which had a huge impact on her life.
it did.
It really helped to stabilize her moods,
And manage her illness.
allowed her to really start living again.
Lithium was a game changer in the treatment of bipolar disorder.
For sure. I mean, it's not a magic bullet.
No medication comes with challenges, adherence side effects.
But for many people, including Patty,
It gave them stability.
a chance to take back control
Outside.
of their lives.
Yeah,
So it was a turning point.
it was. But I think it's really important to remember that medication isn't a cure-all,
Right. It's not the end of the story.
No, it's not.
It's a tool to help manage the symptoms,
Right?
but the journey with bipolar disorders, it continues.
It does. And Patty still had to deal with the impact her illness had had on her relationships, especially with her kids.
Yeah, you think about those years before her diagnosis,
All those years of erratic behavior.
the emotional turmoil.
How did that affect her as a mother?
It makes you wonder, did her children understand what was happening?
Right. That's such a complicated question.
Because mental illness, it doesn't exist in a vacuum,
No, it affects everyone around the person.
especially family members.
Yeah, especially children who might not have the tools to understand what's going on.
Yeah, they don't have the vocabulary.
No, they don't. And in Patty's case, her children were exposed to the raw and unpredictable side of bipolar disorder.
They saw her anger, her erratic behavior.
All of it.
How do you make sense of that as a child?
Right. It's so difficult, and it's no wonder those relationships were strained.
No wonder at all.
And Patty herself talked about the pain she inflicted unintentionally,
Yeah, she expressed regret for how her illness impacted her children.
Which I think speaks volumes about her self-awareness and empathy, even while struggling.
Right.
Yeah, it shows her character.
And this brings us back to the question we always ask on this show, right?
Right, the big question.
Did her bipolar disorder somehow play a role in her creative brilliance?
That's the million-dollar question.
Was it a source of her talent, or was it a separate battle she was fighting alongside her acting career?
It's tempting to draw a direct line to say, the manic energy fueled her performances.
Yeah.
But it's probably more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
We have to be careful about making those simplistic conclusions.
Right. So how do we make sense of this connection then?
Well, Patty herself talked about it. She described her bipolar disorder as both a gift and a curse.
Oh, wow.
It's a powerful image, right?
It really is.
It captures the duality of what she was going through.
It fits into that, that mad genius archetype we see so often.
Yeah, this idea that brilliance and torment are somehow linked.
But we can't romanticize mental illness.
No, absolutely not.
And we can't generalize from one person's experience.
Exactly. We have to remember that this is just one perspective.
One piece of the puzzle.
One piece.
It's about recognizing the complexity.
And the individuality of each person's journey.
Right.
And I think Patty Duke's story really highlights that, this mad genius idea isn't a simple equation.
Right. It's not 1 + 1 = 2.
No, it's a tapestry.
It's woven with so many different threads. Strengths, vulnerability, talent, pain.
Exactly.
And that tapestry, it unfolds over a lifetime.
It does. And even after her diagnosis, even after starting lithium, her journey continued.
It didn't just stop there.
No, it didn't. It was about more than managing symptoms. It was about finding meaning and purpose.
Taking back control.
Yeah, and she did that in an incredible way by becoming an advocate.
Wow.
That's one of the most inspiring things about her story. She didn't hide from her struggles.
She embraced them.
She embraced them. She used her platform to raise awareness about bipolar disorder.
And to break down the stigma.
Exactly.
Encourage others to seek help.
She was so brave to do that, especially back then when mental illness was really hidden.
Yeah, it was a different time.
It was.
And she became a voice for so many people.
She paved the way for more open conversations about mental health.
And she didn't stop acting.
No, she kept working.
Showing that incredible talent, proving that a mental health condition doesn't have to define your life.
Exactly.
Her story is just such a powerful testament to resilience.
Yeah.
And to the possibility of living a fulfilling and productive life, even with bipolar disorder.
Absolutely.
So while we may never know for sure if her bipolar disorder played a role in her creativity, we can definitely appreciate the depth and complexity it brought to her work.
Absolutely.
And to her life.
Her story encourages us to move beyond those simple labels.
Yeah.
And to embrace the full spectrum of human experience.
Right. It's about recognizing that brilliance and vulnerability.
They can coexist.
Yeah, and that mental illness, while challenging, doesn't erase the potential for greatness.
Right. The mad genius narrative is captivating, but it's just one way to look at this complex relationship.
Between creativity and mental health.
Yeah.
Her story reminds us that there are so many stories out there,
So many.
each offering a unique perspective on this fascinating connection between the mind, the heart, and creativity.
And as we keep exploring this topic, we have to approach it with sensitivity,
Yeah.
with humility, and with a willingness to learn from people's lived experiences.
Absolutely. And that's what we'll keep doing here on the Mad Genius Thesis.
Yes, we will.
It's about understanding that brilliance and vulnerability can go hand in hand, and that mental illness, while presenting its own unique challenges, doesn't negate the potential for greatness.
Exactly.
It's about understanding that the mad genius narrative, while captivating, is just one lens through which to view the complexities of human creativity and mental health.
Precisely.
Her story reminds us that there are countless stories waiting to be told, each offering valuable insights into the multifaceted relationship between the mind, the heart, and the creative spirit.
Absolutely.
And as we continue to delve into this topic, it's crucial that we approach it with sensitivity, humility, and a willingness to learn from the lived experiences of others.
Couldn't agree more.
So listeners, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those deep dives going.
Yeah, keep diving.
We'll be back with more fascinating stories and thought-provoking discussions on the connection between creativity and mental illness.
So looking forward to it.
Until then, take care, and remember to challenge those assumptions, embrace those complexities, and keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time.
Bye for now. Yeah, it was a turning point, but, medication, it's not a magic cure. It's a tool
Right.
to help manage the symptoms, but the journey with bipolar disorder, it continues.
Right. It doesn't just end there.
No. And Patty still had to confront the impact her illness had had on her relationships, especially with her children.
Yeah, you think about those years before her diagnosis,
Yeah.
all the erratic behavior, the emotional ups and downs.
How did that affect her role as a mother?
Yeah, you have to wonder, did her children understand what she was going through?
It's a tough question, you know?
Right, because mental illness, it doesn't just affect the individual,
No, it affects everyone around them,
especially family members
especially children.
who might not have the tools to understand.
Or the vocabulary even to express what they're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. And in Patty's case, her kids, they were exposed to the raw, unpredictable nature of bipolar disorder.
They saw her anger, her erratic behavior.
And how do you make sense of that as a child?
It's so difficult, and it's no wonder those relationships were strained.
No wonder at all.
And Patty recognized that later,
Yeah, she talked about the pain she inflicted unintentionally,
expressing regret for how it affected her children.
which I think speaks volumes about her character.
Yeah, it does her self-awareness, her empathy, even while struggling.
Yeah, and it kind of brings us back to the core question of our show, right?
The big question.
Did her bipolar disorder play a role in her creative brilliance?
Was it a source of her talent?
Or was it a separate battle she was fighting alongside her acting career?
It's easy to draw a straight line,
Yeah, to say that manic energy fueled her performances.
But it's probably more nuanced than that.
Right. We can't oversimplify it.
We have to be careful about jumping to those conclusions.
So how do we make sense of this connection then?
Well, Patty herself, she reflected on this.
What does she say?
She described her bipolar disorder as both a gift and a curse.
Wow.
Really powerful imagery.
It is.
It captures that duality.
Big push and pull.
Exactly.
And it kind of plays into that, that mad genius
Mhm.
archetype we see so often.
Yeah, the idea that brilliance and torment are somehow intertwined.
But we can't romanticize mental illness.
We can't.
We can't generalize from one person's experience.
This is just one perspective.
One piece of a much larger puzzle.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing the complexity, the individuality of each person's journey.
And Patty Duke's story, I think, really highlights that this mad genius concept, it's not a simple equation.
Not 1 + 1 = 2.
No, it's more like a tapestry.
With all these different threads interwoven.
Strength, vulnerability, talent, pain.
And that tapestry, it unfolds over a lifetime.
It does. And even after her diagnosis, even after she started taking lithium, her journey continued.
Right. It wasn't a sudden fix.
No, it wasn't. It became about more than just managing the symptom.
It was about finding meaning, purpose.
Reclaiming her agency.
And she did that in such an incredible way
She did.
by becoming an advocate.
She used her platform to raise awareness about bipolar disorder.
To break down the stigma.
To encourage others to seek help.
It was such a brave thing to do, especially back then.
It was a different time.
Mental illness was shrouded in secrecy and shame.
And she became a voice for so many people who were struggling silently.
She really helped to pave the way for more open and honest conversations about mental health.
She did, and on top of all that, she didn't stop acting.
No, she kept working.
Showcasing her talent, proving that a mental health condition doesn't have to define you.
Right. It doesn't have to be a limitation.
Her story is such a testament to resilience.
It is to the possibility of living a fulfilling life, even with bipolar disorder.
And to finding strength in vulnerability.
Yeah, so while we may never definitively answer that question of whether her bipolar disorder fueled her creativity,
Right.
we can definitely appreciate the depth and complexity it brought to her work and her life.
Her story encourages us to move beyond simple labels.
To see the bigger picture.
And to embrace the full spectrum of human experience.
Right. It's about recognizing that brilliance and vulnerability can coexist.
They can and do.
And that mental illness, while presenting its own unique challenges, doesn't negate the potential for greatness.
The Mad Genius narrative is compelling.
It is.
But it's just one way of looking at this complex relationship between creativity and mental health.
And her story reminds us there's so many stories out there.
So many.
Each one offering a unique perspective on this connection between the mind, the heart, and the creative spirit.
And as we continue to delve into this topic, it's crucial that we approach it with sensitivity, with humility, and with a willingness to learn from people's lived experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea, isn't it? This concept of the tortured artist.
It is like this idea that creative brilliance comes from suffering.
It's been around for centuries.
But we have to be careful with that kind of thinking, right?
Oh, absolutely. We can't romanticize mental illness.
Right. It trivializes the very real struggles people face.
Exactly. Patty Duke's story isn't about glorifying her illness. It's about understanding how it was a part of her life, how it shaped her, and how she ultimately transcended it.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Patty Duke's life and legacy, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think her story really highlights the importance of early diagnosis and intervention when it comes to mental health.
Yeah, she struggled for years before getting that diagnosis.
Years, and imagine if she'd had the right support and treatment sooner.
It's a really important point.
We need more awareness, more education, and we need to break down the stigma surrounding mental health.
Completely agree. We need to create a society where people feel comfortable asking for help.
Where mental health is treated with the same urgency and compassion as physical health.
And Patty Duke became a powerful advocate for that very cause.
She did.
Using her platform to speak out about her experiences.
To challenge those misconceptions.
To encourage others to get the help they need.
Her courage and her honesty really made a difference.
And it reminds us that we all have a role to play in advocating for mental health awareness and support.
Absolutely, for ourselves and for those around us.
Whether it's having open conversations, supporting mental health organizations, or simply educating ourselves about these issues.
Every little bit helps.
Patty Duke's story. It's a reminder that even in the face of adversity, there's always hope.
There is.
She found healing, she found purpose.
And she continued to shine.
Despite her struggles.
It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
It is to the power of finding meaning and connection, even when things are tough.
So as we end this deep dive, we encourage you, our listeners, to keep exploring this mad genius question.
Yeah, dive into the lives of other creative individuals.
Think about the complexities of mental health.
And have those open and honest conversations.
Because these are important topics.
They are. And until next time, keep seeking knowledge.
Yeah.
Keep asking those questions. And keep diving deep.
Keep diving.
We'll be back with more fascinating stories and thought-provoking discussions right here on the Mad Genius Thesis.
We'll see you then.
Take care, everyone.